All right, welcome one and all. It's another episode of the Information Revolution, a podcast for those who never metadata they didn't like.
Terrible.
I'm sorry. No, but we're here to talk about information architecture, management, governance, how things are changing, and how things might need to change. So for today's topic, basically, we thought we'd keep going on what we were talking about last time, thinking about if you're not focused on retention and disposal, if retention is not part of your day job, then what is it that you're doing if you work in records and information? So we'll do the quick intros. So my name is Michael Upton. I'm a director of Metataxis New Zealand, a consulting company here in Wellington, and I'm focused on managing digital information.
And I'm Judi Vernau. I'm also with Metataxis New Zealand in Wellington, and I'm an information architect.
Great, and I'm Karl Melrose. In the week that we're shooting this, I'm actually between jobs, which is a bit interesting. But I start with Castlepoint Systems in the next, in a couple of weeks' time. And, I've been around the information industry for a while now.
Nice one. So, yeah, if retention's off the table, Karl, why don't you kick us off? What else would you be looking at?
Yeah, so for me, it's got to be information quality, because if we're not here to improve information quality, and that really means improving the results of our organizations through better quality information, I don't know what there is for us to do if we're in a world where that stuff doesn't matter. I think that, my personal viewpoint on this stuff is that we need to take ownership of that. And I think that even if, regardless of whether we have to manage retention or not, or whether we're thinking about that, we need to take ownership of managing quality, because we're the only people who really understand it. Business managers, they just don't. Unless they've worked in a really high quality information environment before, and then they've come into a really low quality information environment, and then all of a sudden they get it. But I think one of the things that really holds us back is how we articulate quality. And my way of, I guess, articulating quality is probably quite different to everyone else's. When we talk about quality, because we are technical specialists, we have a discipline that has a set of techniques that go with it, and we are well trained in those techniques. We talk about accuracy, timeliness, completeness, all of those sorts of dimensions. No one knows what to do with that. But the way I talk about it is really simple, and I borrowed it from someone else, and it's so long ago that I borrowed it, I can't even remember who it was. But it's does it meet the spec? And the thing about that is that you've got to specify your information. So, if you say that, when we talk about quality, we tend to think about quality in terms of, like Mercedes is high quality, or I don't know, pick your luxury brand. We tend to look at that and we say that's high quality. So quality is some sort of version of, deluxeness or something like that. But, what quality is really about is a specification at least in a business context. And so, if you say that, the information that we need for this process needs to be specified at this level, it needs to be specified like this, CRM system, we need this person's name, their phone number, their title, and the organization they work for. And then you get information that doesn't meet that spec. Well, you have low quality information. If you have the right quality of information, you have quality that meets the spec. Now, the thing about that is that you actually have to write the spec. And that means that you have to sit down with someone who understands what the process needs. And you've got to say, right, what are the information needs of this process? And then let's specify that information in that way. And then let's figure out how we make sure that every single time one of your people gets that information, it's delivered at that specification. Now,
can I just ask you there, Karl?
Yep.
Your example was a data-based example of quality. You need the right name in that field and the right address or whatever it is. But are you also talking about what we love to call unstructured information, documents and images, and how does that work?
Well, it works exactly the same way. What I've just said is really system agnostic. I mean, if you've got a, if you're at a council and you've got a customer service desk and you've got a form there that someone needs to write some details on so that a customer service representative can call them back to do something, or, they want to lodge a development application. So, you've got a form for them and they've got to write some details down on it. Well, there is going to be a certain amount of information that you need in order to process that request. And if you don't give somebody that information, they're not going to be able to process that request. And, you go through processes as well, and you start to look at different aspects of quality. I mean, what you actually mentioned is perfect in some ways, because I was actually thinking of a CRM use case that, I in the last business that I was in, when I said that. But when you start to think about your ability to automate a process, well, that's a qualitative shift as well.
Sure.
If you say, if your specification is we need name, phone number, address, whatever, and it just needs to be on this piece of paper because a person's going to take that and enter it into something or do something with it, then that's one level of quality. But if you then want to say, well, we need to produce a result with this business process in less than 20 minutes, and there's 15 steps, and the only way we can possibly do that is to, be able to punch it into a business system somewhere that can then do some automated stuff to get that result in 20 minutes. That's the kind of thing that you've got to specify. And,
yep.
I guess because I may not be articulating it very well, I use the DICAR model to talk about this stuff as well, which I know you've heard me bang on about, ad nauseum: data, information, knowledge, actions, and results. Basically, it's a nice way of tying information quality to the results that your organization gets. And it's just really that, your results are determined by the actions that you take. Actions are determined, your ability to decide what action to take is determined by your knowledge. How well your knowledge can work is determined by the quality of the information you give someone to actually make a decision. So it ties really tightly. It just lets you tie really tightly the quality of information to the quality of results. But the one that I think makes it really real is that, there was an agency that I spent some time with a couple of years ago, and they had their records in almost exclusively paper records, and they had them in a storage center in one town, and then they had their records team in another city, and then they had the processing center where all the work got done in another city. And so every time somebody in this city over here wanted to work on a case, they'd make a request to the records team, who would bring back the record from their offsite storage facility, two-day ETA. Then they'd pull it out of the box. Yep, they'd pull it out of the box, pack it, send it to the person who actually needed to get the work done. Now, worst case scenario, 4-day process costs $150. So you have, if there is an emergent specification, right? If you haven't sat down and proactively specified your information, then there's a specification there, you just haven't articulated it. That specification is all our stuff's on paper in offsite storage. It's 4 days away and it costs $150 to get. So if you then want to sit down and do something like say, well, we want our customer service team to be able to provide service over the phone in real time, then you've got a problem, because you know that your information is 4 days away and costs $150. So unless you've got someone who's prepared to stay on the phone for 4 days waiting for that information to arrive, then you have a problem with the way your information is specified that prevents you from doing that thing. And so you can sit down and you can actually say to a business unit manager, okay, if you'd like to provide service in real time, then here's how we need to specify the information. Maybe all it is that, we just need to run a digitization project, because all of that information needs to be available for a customer service operator in a business system that they can, get to quickly. So, someone calls in, they go, right, I'm going to go to my ECM or whatever system it is, and I'm just going to go to the records for that thing. That's how that's how you actually achieve that real-time service. And you can't do that if your information is on paper 4 days away. If you want to be able to say, we want to reduce the cost of customer service to, under, $10 per interaction. Well, if it costs $150 to get your information back from offsite storage, and, if you actually tallied up all the people time involved in that as well, I think you'd end up with a lot more money. you've got a quality factor of your information here that says you can't achieve that. So if you go to people and you start saying, right, what results do you want to achieve? And they give you characteristics of, well, we want to work this quickly, we want this cost per unit, those sorts of things. Then you can start to say, well, here is how we need to specify your information in order to achieve that. And here are the, and then you can go and talk to your technical architects and everybody else about how you actually build a business system, do a digitization project, whatever it happens to be, so that you can meet that spec. Did that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. Yep. And so as I understand it, you're essentially saying that you identify quality in the sense of the characteristics of the process and its outcomes and outputs, and then you go, right, well, what are the attributes or dimensions of the information that have to be true for us to meet that bar, basically. Yeah,
absolutely. You just articulated that. You just took my 5-minute, try and articulate it in about 4 seconds.
I think that's relatively easy, I would imagine, to specify. Yeah, probably relatively easy when you're thinking about a process. How could I express this? Around something easy like permissioning or customer relationship management, as you said, or those things that really are very data centric. I wonder how it would work, and I think it would be a fantastic thing to explore this. I really seriously do. Around running a project or policy development or something like that. I mean, I think it would be a really great thing to do. What are the documents we should actually be producing on this team of policymakers? Rather than all these thousands of documents that you're doing, what should we actually be doing? That would be really cool. I never quite thought about it like that before, but I think that would be a very interesting thing to do, and probably mean that there's far less stuff out there because it's not part of
it's fair,
that agreed process. A little confining, possibly, but
I think that one of the decisions you have to make along the way is, should we do this? And can we do this? And I think there are use cases like policy writing where, I mean, look, I guess there's going to be certain data associated with those sorts of things that people are going to. If you sit down with a really sharp policy analyst, they're going to be able to say, these are the characteristics of the research data that I want. But I mean, in terms of specifying the process, the problem with this with all this stuff is that, if you've got a simple problem to solve, like permissioning and those kinds of things, and obviously there are some complicated aspects that go with that, but if you've got a process where you can sit down and you can say, here is the process start to finish, and here are the decision points along the way, then I think you can do this much more simply. But I think there is really a conversation to be had around what level of complicatedness does this process need to get to before we start to say this is really something that's done by people with expertise, and and there are going to be limits to what we can achieve. And I mean, for me, business systems do a brilliant job of automating lots of simple processes and complete start to finish automation. I think there's lots of stuff where you need expertise, where you need people along the way, and I mean, those processes, they're the ones that are going to drive unstructured and semi-structured data in organizations forever, because there are just going to be too many branches in a business process, and too many ifs, buts, thens, things you can't think about ahead of time.
Sure.
If you try and specify a business system for that, I mean, you're just going to fail, because there's just too many branches in the decision process.
There's a great principle that automation makes sense at scale. So if you have to do the same process over and over and over, then automation makes sense. But actually, if all these branches mean that really your process isn't exactly the same, or all the steps keep varying slightly, if you just keep saying, oh, it depends, then that's not a good use case for automation. Yeah.
There's also this.
I wondered.
Final comment.
Okay.
There's also this thing too, where one of the reasons I like the DICAR model is that you can sit down and you can say, we've got to produce this result. What's the gain from producing that result? And then, we need to improve the quality of our information in order to do that. So what's the cost of that? And, if the cost outweighs the gain, you just don't do it. If you've got a team of 8 people writing policy in an agency, and you can sit down and say that, in order to build, to give them the information specified the way that, to build a system to give them the information specified the way they need it, it's going to cost us $10 million because there's just so many branches and we're going to need 40 BAs. And you just sit down and say, well, that's just not worth doing because, you know what, we've got 8 people who are doing that job already and they do a fine job of it. And, we're not going to play that way.
Yeah. Or I might jump in.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So like what you've been saying, Karl, really ties in beautifully with what I was thinking about last time about the idea of basically looking for short-term gains. Go and fix an immediate problem for someone. And I was kind of just trying to give those of you listening a bit of a nudge in terms of, a lot of work around information and records is thinking really long term. And I'm saying that if you can sink some effort into really short term things, that creates this really positive situation for you where basically people want to, use your services basically is one way to look at it, if you're doing it using that kind of commercial mindset. And that then kind of gives you some freedom to do those other things that perhaps are not immediately connected to sort of cost benefit, but in terms of what you're saying, Karl, I mean, that those kinds of activities, that kind of analysis of like, well, what's your process and what's the information related to the process currently look like? That's exactly the kind of thing I had in mind, when I say go and fix a short-term problem. So, for instance, if someone said, we don't understand the status of our work well, then, information folks are in a really good position to go, well, let's help you with your reporting. We might not, we might go, oh, that's BI or something, but actually in terms of just thinking through, well, what information do you need? How do you need to access it? In what timeframes? How could we structure this so that it's repeatable, so that it's reliable? Those kind of getting into the nuts and bolts, those kinds of things about where you do want structured data to describe things so that you can run reports or so you can create dashboards or so you can trigger workflows. That's the kind of stuff that I really see as the direction that information management is going in, or I would like to see it go in as well, and I think it's interesting that this sort of crosses over a little bit with both sort of technical architecture to some point, but I'm really thinking, I mean, we're really just talking about information architecture, I think there, but also with business analysis, I think I've probably said this one before. I'm not necessarily saying that information management folks need to go out and swat up on formal BA courses, but if you are out there in the world and you discover the wild variety of things that people who call themselves BAs actually do, I think what I'm proposing, which is that kind of idea of looking at people's processes and figuring out how you can shift the information quality to shift the outcome of the process. I think that's kind of a BA kind of a thing to do.
Sure.
And really we're just breaking down a business with a slightly different lens, with that focus on information.
Yeah, and I don't think you can build an information architecture without those BA skills to a degree, or a flavor of them, if you like, because you've got to find out from the business exactly what you've just said, really, what they need, what the information flows are, all of that good stuff is very much BA kind of things that they do, and then the information architect needs to put that together to work with the business, obviously, to decide what that architecture needs to look like going forwards.
I think there's a real danger with the information architecture that we stop at thinking about it as we're just designing buckets for people to stick stuff in.
Oh,
and we don't care about what that is and how it goes in there.
Now you've really upset me.
Good.
What would you say to that, Judi?
And that's actually, just as a little side thing, it's one point absolutely against getting in an information architect like me as a consultant, because you need someone there who's looking after it the whole time, feeding it, watering it, helping to make sure that it's doing what your end users need. So, hey guys, don't hire me. You need to have this fed and watered the whole time to make sure that it's still fit for purpose.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say from last week is we had our list of what should we be doing if retention and disposal is off the table, and thinking about it afterwards, which ties in, I think, particularly with what Michael was saying, is we didn't mention education, which I think is also something that should be going on the whole time anyway. I mean, whether or not retention and disposal are on the table. That's an activity in my mind which needs to go on the whole time, and that fits in very well with, when I say education, I mean educating the users, helping them to understand how to do this thing. But also I think that ties in really well with what you were saying, Michael, which is also kind of, it's part education but part advertising, if you like. Hey, here we are, the IA people. We can help you. We can help you to do your work better in all kinds of ways, partly by giving you new tools to help you, and partly by helping you to understand how you can help yourselves and each other by doing these things in different ways, and the organisation, of course. But I
think it's
totally.
making people problem sensitive. Like it's one of the functions of education. That we get people to a point where they know to ask for more. I think at the start of the call, I was talking about, business managers don't know what a high quality information environment looks like unless they've worked in one before and then they've come into a low quality information environment. And I think education, what you're saying there, I think is, it's one way of helping people see that, okay, the way we're working, there's another way, and we can have better quality information, and it can help us lead more effectively and manage more effectively. I mean, what our South Australian friend, Karl Heinz, one of the critical things that he talks about in his program down there is he talks about his digital, I forget what he calls it, but it's a digital literacy type program, which is just helping people understand, what digital is in a little bit, of a better way. And I think he really feels like that's a really important part of building that virtuous cycle. It's equipping people so they know they can ask for something better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I guess I'm kind of focusing on the negatives, that I wouldn't want to see that education be sort of like, we're going to tell you all about our regulatory system and our frameworks. That idea of education in the sense of opening people's eyes to opportunities that they've got, or perhaps risks around how they do work now. That's the kind of stuff that, I totally agree would, be fantastic. And I think probably not for right now, but there'd be a really interesting conversation we could have around the culture of organizations with regards to information, because particularly when I'm running training related to records management and systems and things for people, I think about how everyone kind of, when they're thinking about a system, is rightly thinking about the technology, but so much of the complexity is actually in the people, and in the ways of working and so on, and the competing priorities in terms of people just getting their work done, and what they care about in the work day. So
being organized.
Just being organized. I think showing people ways they can do things simply. I'll take a really basic example when we're talking about Microsoft 365, the ability to spin up a SharePoint list and have a sort of clean data entry form instead of mucking around in a spreadsheet. That's like one of those little qualitative steps where it's suddenly like, oh, okay, we can actually drive collection of information in a more consistent and easier way, so that we can be more organized and, and being more organized in that case might mean so that we can report on stuff, or we can just see the status of where we're at, or we can refer back to the last time something happened, because we've got some structured information that we can use to kind of just filter and sort and find results. So yeah.
And it's commonly accessible. It doesn't have all of the problems that spreadsheets have, you know, where, you know, if multiple people need access to the same data at the same time, you know, they don't have it in a spreadsheet. So what does someone do? They make a copy, and then, you know, and then the world basically ends.
I mean, I think the flip side, I shouldn't get derailed into that stuff, but, you know, there's always that risk when people are creating bespoke point solutions. You know, there's all these things that go wrong there, but those risks exist when people are mucking around with spreadsheets and creating links between them. Anyone who's done an EDRMS, you know, migration and had to fret about why the finance team has stitched 70 different spreadsheets together, you know, they understand the risks in this stuff, but, you know, but as with all things, there's pros and cons, right? There's real benefits in being able to have little systems that allow people to get more organized. Yeah.
I mean, I look at historically too, you know, what records. I have this thing that I need to go and do some serious research about it, because I'm starting to talk about it a bit more. But, you know, I mean, I have this belief that governments basically needed two things. And I think I've banged on about this before, you know.
Oh, it's actually last week.
Yeah, well, but they need an army. They need an army and they need records. And, you know, records is all about being organized. So I keep seeing so many of the problems that records had to solve 20 years ago are just not problems anymore. But that problem of helping people be organized, I think, is the one that people are really crying out for help with. And they don't really know they have it as a problem. But information architecture, I think, just has so much to offer, you know, in helping people organize their work and be organized in terms of how they go about it. And I think, you know, if the records management profession were going to focus on anything over the next 10 years that I think would help them really, you know, create that virtuous cycle that, you know, of people coming to them and saying, you know, hey, I need help with this. It would be helping people organize their work. You know, here is a workflow, you know, here is a list, you know, here is a Power BI report that's based on the workflow and the list, so that we can see the status of work all the time. I think that's meaningful work.
100%. So I think there is a real opportunity to kind of expand the scope of what we think of as, you know, being a practitioner out there doing information management.
Definitely.
And time-wise, that
Good
pretty
places.
much is probably a good place to wrap it up for today. So hope you've enjoyed listening. Once again, if you listen to this and you think, oh, I'd like to be in on this show, then please do get in touch with us. We are looking for guests in the future. So thanks one and all, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye for now.